Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to a fun, educational episode where we are going to talk about the history of Star Wars animation. And joining me is my good friend, Alex Leonis. Welcome, Alex.
Hey,
Hey.
thank you for having me.
Oh my God. Ever since you drew me the little Niku with his little water bottle and like sent me the little sticker, I've been like, I need to figure out a way that like Alex can come on the show and show how talented she is. Oh my God.
I don't think I'm that talented. I just like drawing the really niche characters that don't have a lot of fan art, but
Yeah.
but it's fine.
Well, no, he's so cute. Like, I want like a little, one of those little flat bubble keychain things for him.
I don't know how to make those, but I'll have to figure it out.
Like, yeah, like maybe there's a producer. I'll look at it, but I was like, I need him on my keychain. He's so cute. He's as cute as like Funkos are cute.
Yeah, and I drew Nico as a Funko too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I sent it to Funko because I'm getting so annoyed with them about not making resistance Funkos. And
Yeah, I've been trying to get in there to talk to somebody who does the Star Wars ones because I get annoyed with what they choose to do too.
I just keep telling them you have to make an Eco Funko and it has to have the water bottle.
They very rarely do props though, like if they can get away with not doing them. Okay, but first, Alex, maybe you could give a little bit about your background and why you are an awesome guest for this particular show.
Okay, hi, I'm a character animator and I work at Mercury Filmworks and I'm currently working on Tangled the series.
Yeah, so you actually do this work.
Yeah, I've been working in the industry for 4 years now, and I studied hand-drawn animation in school.
So like people like Brian Kessinger might be people that you're really interested in hearing from. And your background itself, like it's awesome to see that hand-drawn animation is still being used.
It's slowly leaving schools. Less and less students are learning it. So it's really sad, but I'm really glad I have that background because I think it's really beneficial for the industry, for sure.
One of the reasons I've been wanting to do more episodes on animation is because there seems to be some misconceptions out there about how long it takes to actually produce an animated show. And that could be anything from hand-drawn animation like you do all the way through like the 3D animation. And we thought we could go into not only a little bit of like, you know, what goes into creating an animated show, but also a little bit about the history of Star Wars animation and like where it's all come from and kind of the turning points where it definitely seems like Lucasfilm decided to do things differently. And we can talk through those as we go through the different shows. But from a rough perspective, how does animation happen?
So I work in animation, so I can't talk in detail about like production too much, but it starts in the writing room and then eventually it trickles all the way down to boarding and backgrounds and animation and then effects and lighting and post-production. Really, really, really long process. And it's different for every production, like how long it takes.
Yeah. And somewhere in there, there's voice acting. Somewhere in there, there's, you know, and if it's 3D specifically, there's a layer of, do we already have an asset? Do we need to build an asset?
Yeah.
Do we need to build a new background? Because 3D animation, unlike hand-drawn animation, you kind of have to build things almost from scratch every single time, unless you already have a background that's already pre-done.
It's kind of the same because if there's a new character added to the TV show, the character designers still have to create that character and make model sheets, like turnarounds, different expressions for the animators. So even though they're not, I guess, rigging a character like in 3D, they're still building that character for the animators to reproduce.
Right. And to know what they look like from all angles and their expressions. And they do like expression sheets where they'll like show like this is my scrunched up face. This is my happy face. Yeah. Like they'll give them all of those kind of templates almost.
Yeah. And there's also 2D digital animation too, and that works similar to 3D animation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Forces of Destiny.
And with rigging specifically, what they do is if there's a character, they basically build them in a virtual 3D world with all of the different functions of the character so that when the animators get the character, they can almost pose them like a 3D doll.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. It's like I always explain my job to people that I'm playing with dolls. Basically, I'm posing them out, I'm acting them out. Like that's what I do.
Yeah, and it's like you're taking that pre-done character and it's more like in a way puppetry than like or like stop motion animation. It's more like that than what people think it is.
I think it depends on the show because hand-drawn animation still lends really, really well to like my background in hand-drawn still helps me with digital animation.
Right.
Because you need to understand like drawing fundamentals and how things work in space and in perspective and what a good pose silhouette looks like. And I think drawing still lends itself to that. Mm-hmm. And not everyone can just be an animator like without drawing experience.
Did you want to talk about the 12 principles of animation?
Yeah, sure. So if anyone's ever taken any animation class, like community level or just like in like a 101 in college, you probably learned these. And they're 12 basic principles that the two of the 9 old men, Disney's 9 old men, created for their book. And it's basically these 12 things. They're so important to how a scene will move and how a character will move, and even sometimes props. So the 12 principles are stretch and squash. So that's when the character, you show the volume and the weight and the physical, like let's say it's like a flour sack. That's the most basic thing that you could do, or a bouncing ball. It'll squash on impact to show the weight, that weight is coming down and it's heavy. And then when it'll bounce back up, it'll stretch really, really, really skinny. To show the movement. And it's moving so fast that your eye might not catch it, but you'll catch the movement kind of.
Yeah. And that's actually going to apply later on to some of the character design that we see in Resistance.
Because Resistance uses it the most out of any Star Wars show.
They're almost like rubber, like especially Kaz is like, I love the one like image that you grabbed for our notes of Kaz, and he's like basically like a wet noodle.
Yeah, he is. It's like the old 30s rubber hosing stuff with Mickey and
like how you imagine like the arms are kind of like just noodles or hoses. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the next principle is anticipation. So that's like preparing for an action. So let's say like the character runs forward, but they like kind of scrunch up and take a step back before they launch themselves forward.
Yeah.
So that's important for someone to just like catch it. And it's very common to see in Looney Tunes cartoons and stuff like that, like really zany stuff, where in a more realistic show that anticipation will be more subtle. Like it'll be maybe just the head or the eyes or something. Mm-hmm. Staging. So staging is important to push the audience's eyes to a certain place in the screen. So you want to make sure that the character is on the rule of 2/3. What's the rule of 2/3? So the rule of 2/3 is when you split the screen into 9 quadrants, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's important for photography too, and for any film. And basically you want the eye to go on the cross sections of those squares. It's like the 4 crosses that live in the middle of the 9 squares. Yeah. Yeah. And then straight ahead action, pose to pose. And that's the way the animator animates the scene. So straight ahead action is you go from the start pose to the end pose and you just do it in that order. Pose to pose animation is you choose your storytelling poses and you draw those out, and then you start adding in breakdowns in the middle, and you kind of work from poses in, like into the in-betweens. Usually that's used like for better planning. There's very rare cases that you would do straightforward animation. And then slow in and slow out, it's the speed is going to go at. So a slow in would mean it's slowing in as it gets to a pose, and those drawings are going to get closer together. And then slow out is when you slow out of a pose. So you would start to pick up speed out of a single pose.
Right. And that adds to pacing. And
yeah, it's like a pendulum. And then arcs, they're basically the way the character moves between poses, and you want to see the character move on an arc to give it depth instead of like a straight line between poses.
My experience as a director is primarily on the stage, and it's instead of a character or an actor walking like in a straight line across a stage, what we recommend is like a curve or an arc so that it creates more interesting eye movement. Yeah.
It's definitely more interesting, and it doesn't look as stiff either.
Yeah.
It really like gives life to the animation. Secondary action, so that's the action that's not the focus. So let's say Kaz is pointing. So maybe the point's the primary action, but the secondary action is maybe he's turning his head.
Yeah.
It's whatever the action isn't the focus of the scene.
But fills it out, and so people aren't as stiff and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important, making it less stiff. And then timing's the next one, and that's just, it's important to have different speeds in a scene. It needs to slow down and speed up and have different poses going at different speeds. And it's just more interesting that way.
Yeah.
And exaggeration. So that's just like overstating your movements. In a show like Resistance, it's pretty exaggerated compared to Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Clone Wars is subtle, and it's great animation, but it's very different.
Yeah, and I would say that we're getting levels of even more subtlety with what we've seen from the clips of Clone Wars Season 7, that we're going to get like even more subtle like facial expressions and like hand movements, and even like hair was moving. I was freaked out. I was like, oh my God, their hair is going to start moving.
Yeah, Clone Wars tends to focus on the face and do a lot of expression stuff, where Resistance is almost like physical comedy at times. Like it's like super physical.
Yeah.
And then solid drawing is important to understand the silhouette, and then like 3D space on how, like, let's say an arm is reaching towards the screen. You want that perspective to be working.
Yeah.
And the weight, and like making sure that the character is standing up straight and it doesn't look like they're falling over.
Yeah.
And then the last
even
one,
with weird camera angles, like even if the camera angle's a little weird, like you have to have the character look like they're standing up straight.
Yeah, it's something really common that you sometimes see, that the character kind of looks like maybe they're falling over. I don't think it's as common in 3D, but in 2D, sometimes you have to watch it. And then the last one is appeal. So you want to make sure that the drawings are appealing, that they're compelling, that they look interesting. And like, it could be an ugly character, but the ugly character still needs to have appeal to it. The way the shapes work on their face, or you want to have different size shapes, like nose is small, maybe the eyes are big, different things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the rundown of the principles.
No problem.
Alex, when did Star Wars animation actually start?
It started in 1978 with the holiday special.
Oh yeah. What is typically considered to be the Boba Fett cartoon.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually go by that name, which I actually didn't know this.
I didn't know it either, but I researched it and I found the title of the short. It's a 9-minute long short film. It's called The Story of the Faithful Wookiee.
I mean, Chewbacca, right? Like he is, although doesn't he like throw up the medal that Han got like halfway through? He throws it like in the garbage control.
The whole cartoon is just ridiculous.
Like we've seen some of the like pieces that were introduced in that, like the weird gun that Boba Fett has we've seen on the set of Mandalorian. So it's really, like they're cool. Kind of like playing with this idea that maybe this is kind of a more canon story, which I find super weird.
It's interesting how much is pulled from other productions for animation. Like we'll see later when we talk about Rebels about how much artwork they took from other productions for Rebels. So it's interesting to see them taking from the holiday special for the Mandalorian. It's just it's really cool. Yeah.
And the little bit of the background on this one, again, the holiday special, I do not believe is canon at all. So, I mean, it's just one of those like things that people don't really talk about, but people do consider this Boba Fett cartoon actually to be very good. It's essentially what happens is they land, well, the Millennium Falcon is like trying to get someplace. They end up kind of getting in trouble. They end up landing on this planet that's a water planet, but it kind of looks like pudding, maybe Jello.
It kind of looks like a Dr. Seuss cartoon.
Yeah, in some ways, like with the kind of creature that Boba Fett rides.
The dinosaur.
Yeah, Boba Fett comes in there and he's like, "I'll help you out," and he's got this rough voice, and he's like, and he's like riding a dinosaur, which is awesome. And Han gets like the worst drawn face.
Here's the thing about the holiday special is the designs aren't really catered to animation. They're very highly detailed and illustrative. So those animators, it was hand-drawn animation. Those animators were reproducing those drawings with all those details on the face, like all the wrinkles and everything. Yeah. And it couldn't have been easy because the more details you put on, the harder it is to track on the animation and be able to reproduce it.
Yeah, but it looked like they chose caricature choices rather than, say, trying to make an animated version of the character. Like, because he looks very much like you would go to, like New York City, go to Central Park, and the caricature drawers are there.
Yeah,
like he looks like a caricature.
Really caricatured, which, like I said, it's not easy for
No, I know.
animators.
It was a weird choice.
To make that. Because at the time when you were seeing stuff like Scooby-Doo, like those designs were really simple and easy for the animators to keep on model and to keep like reproducing them like multiple times. So it was an interesting choice to make it so illustrative.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they went that way, but it's interesting. It reminds me of Grease, like the beginning.
Yeah, like the Grease cartoon in the it's very. But like that, those were similar time frames. Maybe it was like a similar animation house or something like that did them.
I don't think this animation studio did it, but because the animation studio that did the Faithful Wookiee was in Toronto. It's an animation studio called Nelvana, and they're still open today. And they did Magic School Bus and they did Strawberry Shortcake. They've done a lot of TV shows.
Oh wow. I do think that if you haven't had a chance to watch The Faithful Wookiee, that is a part of the holiday special you should definitely watch.
Yeah, it's only 9 minutes. It's
good. Yeah. And it's a fun little story. They get into trouble. They get themselves out of trouble. Boba Fett is pretty awesome in it. I think that's actually maybe where the like cult of Boba Fett started.
Yeah, I mean he's the most important in that short, for sure. Yeah. More important than he's ever been in other things.
Anything else. Oh, maybe Attack of the Clones. Like he kind of had a little bit more, and like Rebels. Like he's had like as a kid, he had like way more play than as an adult.
All the Boba Fett fans are gonna attack me now.
No, I mean like he probably needs his own storytelling at some point. And he's had a little bit in like Clone Wars, but we're getting a whole Mandalorian TV show.
So we'll see.
We'll see what happens. After that, we move into what is considered to be almost the dark times, right? So there really wasn't much that kind of came out of the original trilogy time frame. Like it wasn't like Lucas was like, hey, let's do this and let's do that at the same time. He was like, let's make movies and then sell lots of toys off of those movies.
After that, like there was some stop motion in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, like there wasn't really anything going on animation wise during the original trilogy.
Yeah, exactly. And there wasn't like how some movies would use animation kind of like for backgrounds or whatever. There wasn't even any of that. Like they used.
It was pretty early on to be able to use that because the first 3D animation, digital animation was in 72, I believe. And it was the computer animated hands. It was in the movie Future World, the sequel to the Westworld movie.
Right.
So, and it was very primitive. So, I mean, at that time, it was choosing between using sets or using animation that looked kind of fake, right? Like it wasn't so great yet.
And the stop motion animation was specifically for the Tauntauns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the AT-ATs.
And the AT-ATs, yeah, because they would move like one step at a time. Mm-hmm. I just met a friend who knows one of the small scale photographers that was working on Empire Strikes Back.
So that's so cool.
I'm going to try to get that person on the show to be able to talk about like all of that experience.
That would be, I didn't find out much info on it, but I know they, ILM created this device that shook the stop motion to create like movement in the like end frame.
Oh.
Yeah, they like created this thing that like just shook underneath the AT-AT and it created kind of blur to it to make it look like it's moving.
Oh, cool. I've always found the Tauntauns to be really successful. I mean, like the stop motion for creature design is quite, it was used almost from like the 40s.
Yeah, but I mean, at the time of Empire Strikes Back, it hadn't been used in a big budget Hollywood movie since King Kong in 1933.
Yeah.
So
because it was used for like skeleton armies, being
used in small ways.
Yeah, like other things like that. But I found the Tauntauns to be like they hold up still.
Yeah, they look great. Like I think it looks great. But stop motion, I guess I don't know that much about stop motion, but I assume that the techniques haven't changed too much. You do get like the benefit of having digital stuff to help it out, but I would assume that the techniques haven't changed that much since then.
They have been able to blend it a little bit better. Or like, for example, like Kubo and the Two Strings, like they're able to, have the stop motion happen on green screen so then they can fill in the background.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful movie.
Oh, I love it so much. It's it breaks my, like it hurts me every time I watch it, but I'm like, I need to watch this movie. Put it in.
I think it's insane that they're able to keep the monkey fur like blowing the whole movie. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, it's good. And then after that, we had two more kind of shows that like popped up in the dark times. The dark times.
They came out in 1985, both of them, and they were Ewoks and Droids.
Like very much plugging into the kids that still wanted to see Star Wars.
Yeah, it was very Saturday morning cartoon, very simple stuff. And I watched most of Droids and I watched a little bit of Ewoks like over the past week. It's interesting, and I really recommend listening to Blast Points did commentary on Droids.
Awesome.
Over the episode, and they're so funny. It was really entertaining listening to it that way too.
No, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, and I know that like droid like animation is something they're bringing back. Like Brian Kessinger is working on that specifically with those droid books. With C-3PO Doesn't Like Sand, and now the R2-D2 book that he's also working on. I love that Brian is working on more Star Wars stuff. It makes me so happy. and like if you go back to the interview I had with him, he was specifically asked to do it because of his experiences doing Little Kylo and being able to get expression out of Little Kylo's mask. Yeah, so and he's like, I very much relied on droids because they were able to get expression out of C-3PO and out of the other droids. So
the way the droids moved in Droids was super wonky, like super insane and super pushed. R2 kind of moved like a gummy eraser, like he was so flexible. That we will probably see ever on the 3D animated shows because they move more like they're metal. They're like hard
like
metal,
solid.
But I love that they did that. I don't know why they did that, but it's really charming, and I think it's great.
But we do get to see, I think we're going to get to see more of that in Brian's books. Like,
Yeah.
from an illustrative perspective, they're going to be more rubbery. I can't imagine that he's going to not, like, especially like that one R2D2 shot of his new book, of the book that he's illustrating. He looks like he's kind of bent a little bit, and I was like, oh,
Yeah,
he's got some play.
It looks really great, and it kind of looked like Clone Wars, also like 2003 Clone Wars.
Oh yeah.
He was a little wonky in that one too, so it looks great for books. It looks really, really great, and it gives a lot of personality to the characters.
Yeah.
Because you can't really use R2's noises as much with a book. So
yeah, that's true.
You have to get his personality somewhere else.
Yeah, that's very true. He is in some ways the voice that was given to him, you know, with the sound design. Mm-hmm. Did you want to talk about Ralph Breaks the Internet too? This is a spoiler for that movie if you haven't seen
it. Small spoiler, I guess. But I noticed the first time I saw Ralph Breaks the Internet, and 3PO walks into the room where all the princesses are, and he's moving so clunkily.
He's like their butler. It's awesome.
I saw him moving. I'm like, that's really weird. I mean, that's definitely a style choice, because it's Disney animation. They're fantastic animators. Like, this is definitely a style choice that he's moving so like exaggerated, even more than Anthony Daniels, like crazy. It's like, that's weird. And then I started watching Droids, and I was like, wait a second. It kind of looks like he's moving like he moves on Droids. So I have no confirmation that they did that on purpose, but I noticed that connection.
I would say that, yeah, they definitely, at least Brian was very familiar with Droids when he took on that one project. So they look back in the archives, I guess, you know, to understand how to make things, feel in a particular way, which I would have gone maybe more with the Clone Wars animation, you know, because it would have maybe felt more similar.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, that's really janky. That's like crazy, but it was funny.
I'm definitely going to check out the Blast Points episode.
It's really fun.
Excited.
I think they have 3.
Oh, awesome.
They have 3 episodes going over droids. Hopefully they do more. they talk about Kylo Ren, so it's all good.
Yeah, Kylo Ren! For those that don't know, Kylo Ren is a pirate from Droids, and he's a little bit of an overweight character, and he wears like
a belly shirt.
Yeah, like a belly shirt where he shows his belly, and he like the funny thing is that he just has a very similar name to Kylo Ren. So it's like, and people are like, is this where they got the inspiration for the name? I do not think so. I think that just Star Wars has very Star Warsian names, and there's only so much to choose from.
I'm just picturing JJ like telling the archivist, bring me names, bring me baby boy names in the Star Wars universe, and then Kylo Ren, and he's like, that's perfect.
Well, I mean, like Kylo is like Skywalker Solo mashed together. I just think that it's a weird coincidence, but still funny. And then we kind of had some dark times. I mean, Droids continued for a little while, Ewoks, but nothing. 90s? Nothing.
There were novels, but not any animation.
Like from an animation perspective, it was not something, they didn't plug into Saturday morning cartoons. And I would say like at that time, you know, you just kind of relied on your movies. Like you didn't have anything that like filled in the gaps. And I remember when I heard about this this set of shorts coming out, I was so excited. Like I freaked out. I was so excited. And so just to let you know, this all came out just before Attack of the Clones was released. So these shorts came out. So we're talking about the 2003 Clone Wars.
The Genndy Tartakovsky shorts.
Yes, exactly. And I watched like all of the production stuff on how they designed the fights, and they designed the fights on sticky notes.
No way. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
so like they would literally take like huge pads of sticky notes and draw the characters almost like stick form.
Like they'll use them for boards. Like
Yeah, and then they would lay them out on like the wall and then like draw a new one, and then they would take photos of that and then give that to the animators. Like they did it very quick.
Yeah.
Because the fights are very intense and
Yeah, it's
crazy.
a very action heavy show. Very, very action heavy. And the first two seasons were like 5-minute shorts. Then the third season was like 12 to 15 minutes. Like they were much longer, and they were able to tell more of a story in the third season than just fighting in the first and second. And this was still hand drawn in 2003. They were still drawing on paper, but they were inking it digitally because in 1989, Disney used this system called Caps on Little Mermaid, and it was the first time completely inked digitally on a feature film. So from then on, animation was starting to be inked digitally, but still on paper, hand drawn, like the lines. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like, yeah, I think like the sticky notes were like some weird color, like pink. Like they have like on the behind the scenes on my DVD they have like them talking about the fights, because the fights were the most important thing in the like creators' minds. The story was very secondary.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching it and I was like, wow, this is a lot of fighting. So if you like lightsaber battles, like watch this. There's a lot.
Yeah. And I would say like this is almost the end of an era for Star Wars too, because emotionally and story-wise, the pivot happened very soon after this with the development of Clone Wars.
Yeah, we went from traditional to digital after this, pretty much, like completely to Clone Wars, where nothing's on paper, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And also like from a story perspective, the idea of something looking cool or being there for just the action, everything has to have a story reason after this point in the storytelling.
Yeah, they really took a 180 turn. Like, now we're going to focus on story first. Not that like the animation is bad. It didn't get bad. It improved actually, but they really took story as priority after this. They knew that that's how to get the audience.
Yeah, and I would say like the 2003 Clone Wars is still good. Like it still has story and it still is good, but the focus was on making Star Wars look cool.
Yeah, and here's the thing. The drawings I've seen on that show are, some of the production art for that show is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like a TV show has no right to have some drawings that good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the animation was all right, but the storytelling poses between the animation on that show were strong. Like the silhouettes were beautiful. There were streamlines. The animation was a little like,
well, and they were stylistic. Yeah, like they were stylistic with that like very Samurai Jack feel. Like it looked very Asian inspired. And had that like, you know, those poses and like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that had like a really strong jaw, like you know, and like Yoda looked cool and angry all the time.
Palpatine looked really cool too.
Yeah, like everybody kind of looked cool, and then like that you see Anakin get his scar and he's really depressed all the time.
Yeah, and then he wears high-waisted pants and Lolo.
Yeah, I mean, like it's weird to say this, but it was of its time in some ways. Like it was before like a mental shift happened from a storytelling perspective. And it's funny because like this being in production at this time, this is before Clone Wars, you know, comes out. But I mean, we're getting Avatar: The Last Airbender just after this. Like that's the storytelling that we're getting.
Yeah, that starts that era of these TV shows aren't just animation. This is more than just animation. Yeah.
And like the new era of storytelling. And Dave Filoni has talked a lot about how he was twist my rubber arm, convinced to come to Lucasfilm to start this new era. And
so it's funny, the whole story.
It's awesome. But he was working. He was just finishing the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and he gets this call, and it's like, like, hey, George Lucas wants to talk to you.
And he thought it was this fun him.
Yeah, he just thought like it wasn't real. And he went to go have the conversation, and like George sat him down and was like, so you want to do it? You want to do it? Like in his Georgie way. And like he kind of died inside a little bit, just because like this is like his dream and everything. And of course he wants to do it. And everybody talks about how Dave Filoni very much is like the chosen successor of George Lucas from a story perspective, especially. And George taught him all about story. But the thing that Dave Filoni has that George didn't have, and in some ways we're very lucky that George chose a very talented storyteller in his almost like apprentice. In some ways, like George is the master and had made mistakes along the way, but he chose an apprentice that in some ways was incredibly talented and could learn and adapt what George always meant to do and make it better.
Yeah, and I think what Dave brings to the table is he does have that animation background. Mm-hmm. Like he came from 2D hand-drawn animation, and he was doing layouts like backgrounds on King of the Hill before he even got to Avatar. So he has that like hands-on experience with like the animation pipeline, and I think that also lends well to him kind of taking over this role, understanding everything.
And from just being in charge of the new Clone Wars cartoon that was coming out, so not just the cartoon, but they made the animated movie first.
Originally though, that wasn't going to be a movie. George loved it so much that they decided they would release it.
And it very much reads like 4 episodes back to back.
Yeah. I was reading reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for it last night, and it was like people just dumping on this thing. Like some people saying, oh, like the animation was pretty good, but like the story, and
I don't know. When I heard it was coming to the theater, I was so excited. I still remember going to the movie theater to see it, and I didn't have kids at the time. I was just excited to see Star Wars in the theater again, because this was post Revenge of the Sith, obviously, and it had been a couple of years. Do you remember the year this came out?
2008.
2008. Yeah, it had been a couple
3 years late.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, they're still making Star Wars. That was my thought. They're still making Star Wars. And at the time, there was also the rumor that we were going to get a live action bounty hunter show, which theoretically, maybe The Mandalorian is.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be filmed in Australia.
Oh, interesting. And I guess at the time, Australia and New Zealand were being heavily used for like very CG heavy shows like
Lord of the Rings and through Weta. They had like that whole CG animation studio down there. But that was the rumor. We were going to get a full bounty hunter show set between like the 2 trilogies. And it never came to fruition because I think that George was just tired.
Yeah. I mean, he was going to retire before Clone Wars came out.
Yeah.
He was going to just hand over everything, but then he came on board too for that.
Well, and I think that he enjoyed being able to have somebody that he could trust with the vision to actually make it come to fruition.
Yeah.
Like he enjoyed having Dave there to bring about his massive idea of what is reality, And in some ways, I love the Clone Wars, and we can talk about the animation in a second. I just need to talk about how much I love the Clone Wars. I love the Clone Wars for the weirdest reasons. Like, it's
a weird show.
Yeah, but I love it because it is fundamentally Star Wars storytelling in a microcosm. It is iterative, non-linear storytelling.
It's crazy. And I love that George's favorite episode is the Droids one.
It's my favorite episode.
Oh, really?
Well, wait. Which one? The one with the Gascon arc? Or the one where they're the Droids Day Out?
Droids Day Out. That's his favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite episode too. No, and because We get to see C-3PO's personality in perfection and the relationship between C-3PO and R2-D2. I've talked about this episode on the show, like in my Droids month. Like I've talked about this because all C-3PO wants to do is plan events.
A wedding. Wedding.
He wants to plan a wedding. He wants to plan anything, but he does not have the ability to not stress about anything. But he would just be happy if he could just plan his wedding and have R2-D2 run around and do all the things to get everything ready. Like, and he is a big stress case. So like he stressed out and he forgot to do things. And I love that you get to see Anakin and Padme's like married life, like it
really adds to their relationship. Like the show, like it does it so well.
Yeah.
And it really adds to what you see like in the prequel films.
Yeah, it does. And very much like what they did with especially Matt Lanter playing Anakin fleshed out that character so much. I don't think what Hayden did was bad. I think what he did was what was required of him. He had to show him being this troubled teen, like literally a troubled teen, and then show him growing up and becoming this troubled adult. But we got to see the hero of the Republic, Anakin Skywalker, in that show. And I think that did so much service to the character in general, because you can only show so much in 4 hours of an adult character from a movie perspective, but you had 6 seasons to show Anakin change and be a hero, but also be conflicted, but also be a jealous husband at one point. Like you got so many story moments that contributed to that character being, I would say, loved by the end of Clone Wars.
And I'll springboard off the voice acting stuff. Matt Lanter did a fantastic job. That whole cast did an amazing job, and I love that.
Like D. Barker Bradley,
Ashley Eckstein,
James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan, and then who played Padme?
Kat Tabor.
Yeah, Kat Tabor. Yeah.
That group, and I love that Dave had them record together because that's not always the case in animation.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get everyone in the same room at the same time, but it really lended to good animation. And when the animators receive good voice acting for their scenes, they're even more inspired to put that work into the scene. Like I know for me, if I get a scene that I'm like, oh wow, this voice acting is great, like I'm more inspired to put all of myself into that scene and get the most out of that voice acting.
Yeah, and especially if you're hearing the emotion in the voice, which you can. This is something I'm learning doing an audio drama.
Yeah.
Is that you can hear the emotion in the voice. And so if the animators are given that, they're more likely to push that expression to reflect that. And then it feels more like a cohesive unit of a character rather than just, one person giving a good performance and the animator kind of not, or the animator giving a good physical expression. Yeah.
And I know George really drove home the idea that not only do you need talented voice actors, but you need talented animation actors, because in the end, the animators are just as much the actors as the voice actors are. It's like a joint 50% effort, like on the show.
Yeah, I agree. And so did you want to talk a little bit about the CGI animation?
So now we've gone from 2D animation to 3D animation. So this is completely different. And I have very, very novice experience with 3D animation. But what this show is, they went from doing more snappy animation on Clone Wars from 2003 to very subtle acting. Like a character will hit a pose and they'll talk within that pose for a while, and they won't move around too much. And it's more animation in the face. It's more lifelike than bouncy, lots of stretch and squash. It's I wouldn't say it's stiff animation. It's just more lifelike.
Like they tried to make them feel like animated people.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind about animation and why you'll very much hear that the first season is rougher than future seasons is because much like 2D animation or much like a live action show, they only have so much budget per year. And that budget has to be used to create characters and all of the physical assets that they could potentially pull from. So that's everything down from backgrounds to ships to props to... So if they need something new created, they have to use part of that like animation budget to create that new thing. But once they have that new thing, and that's where Clone Wars kind of gets away with a little bit of going back in time and going forward in time and kind of like going all over the place and kind of jumping around, is because they had all of these physical assets built by the time they get to maybe third season, which is considered to be the start of like the better storytelling as well as animation. They had 2
But I would
years.
also say it's not only physical things that are being reused, but for the animators, like from what I've heard from people, is it takes like a year. It takes at least 1 season for someone to get used to animating on that show.
Yeah.
So like when you first start, you're like getting used to the builds, or you're getting used to the way a certain character acts or inflects and the way they use their facial expressions. It takes a while for the animator to like start to like know exactly how a character acts. So it takes them time to get better too, not only the physical like attributes in the software.
And it's quite common, even from a storytelling perspective, for it to take upwards of a year, even more, for the story to establish characters. And that's why I'm gonna come back to this point when we get to Resistance, because it has had the quickest turnaround of any Star Wars show, or sorry, any animated show that I have seen, even quicker than say Dragon Prince, actually, which just came out, which is done by the same people as Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I love that show.
I love it too. And
so
season 2. Season 2. But Resistance has had a quicker turnaround from character development episodes to story plot than I have seen in any animated show. There might be some out there that that like jump right into story plot and just expect you to come along for the ride. Commonly, I would say anime does that. They just like throw you into the deep end and expect you to swim. But North American Western animation, there's typically at least half a season of character development episodes before they throw you into plot. If they ever throw you into plot, it could always just be one-off, like episodic.
Maybe they think it's more digestible for the Western audience. I don't know.
It's a storytelling choice that we choose to do out here. Like there are shows that choose to do an entire 2 seasons sometimes, like as an example, but these are French shows. Code Lyoko and Miraculous Ladybug both did almost an entire first season before they jumped into any plot. Like it's an entire season, so you had to stick with that for like 22 episodes of episodic.
Yeah, and sometimes that's hard
things.
To like stick with it to get to the meat of the story.
Exactly. Yeah, the animation got really a lot better after the first season, and even better after the third season. They did a character revamp on the design. Ahsoka got new outfit. Anakin got a different outfit. So did Obi-Wan. They got rid of their armor. They also played a lot more with the storytelling, and that lent to being able to animate different environments. And we got some really amazing environments, like when they went to Mortis. We got Umbara, which to me is the most amazing planet. There was a question on Twitter, or there was a question out there. A friend of mine was asking, which animated planet would you like to see live action? And I said Umbara, because it's so cool. What's your choice? What would you like to see live action?
I'm trying to think. I'd like to see Lothal.
Oh yeah. It's cool. The clones themselves got some really cool treatment in the Clone Wars, like with all of the different versions of them. And then D. Barker Bradley gave amazing voice actor performances, so every clone sounded different.
He's so talented.
Yeah, my dream is to talk to him.
Maybe you will at Celebration.
Maybe. Maybe. He's fabulous, and I know he is known for his animal voices. So he'll do like he did all of the animals on Avatar: The Last Airbender, but he did such a good job on all of the clones, and Rex is one of my favorite characters. He's complex and awesome.
Mm-hmm. And like I also like that some of the clones move differently too.
Yeah,
and it really shows that they're individuals, which is pretty much like a huge point of the show.
I mean, we're not going to go too much into the story in this show because this is not the point. But I would love to have Alex back to talk about more story stuff related to animation, because like there is a lot to talk about.
When I watch Resistance, Shannon and I are like, we chat while we watch at the same time, and well, like I'll be like, oh my gosh, the animation on this episode is so nuts. And it's like, I feel like I have to watch the episode like 3 times because sometimes I zero too much on the animation itself and not the story. So it's like, there's so much there.
I do the same thing, but with like music. My ear is now so attuned because I've been doing all these musical episodes with Christy and just like focusing on it. Like I will catch like the weirdest stuff in the music, and I'm talking to people and they're like, did you notice that like this happens with Rebels a lot when I was watching it? I'm like, did you notice the like organ music for Thrawn? And people are like, what? Yeah. So I get focused on certain aspects of it like you, and sometimes I have to watch things over again. With Rebels, I watched every single episode at least 3 times, usually twice right in a row, and then a 3rd time as a rewatch every season. To like,
that's awesome.
I was a little intense about Rebels.
Rebels is a great show. I can't wait to dig into that show, because through all my research, I think I stan that show the most from just like the production standpoint. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And we got some really cool, amazing storytelling that has led us into this new era, like with Maul coming back. And yeah. Did you want to talk a little bit about how he was built? Yeah,
so they put a lot of articulation in his nose region and mouth region to really be able to get that snare good. And there's a video on StarWars.com that actually shows like the supervising animator show you exactly how far you can push it. And it's like, it's so great. Like, I love that they're able to like scrunch that nose up and really get his expressions going. And the like tattoos on his face really lend well to showing that depth in expression with him, because you can see them wrap over the planes of his face, and it really like does a lot for him.
Yeah, and of course Sam Witwer offering the voice of Maul, and my dream is actually just to have a live action version of him, in a show played by
Sam Witwer is so awesome. I would too.
Well, like just no, but like played, like actually bring back Ray Park to physically play him, and then have the voice of Sam, and then like have it be like a crime, political drama.
Maybe he'll be on the Cassian show. Who knows?
Oh my god. Okay. I just like freaked out a little bit mentally. Thank you. It was sad when the Disney acquisition happened, because we, like those of us that were very invested in this show, realized it was up in the air as soon as the Disney acquisition happened. I'm happy they finished half of season 6 with those like Yoda lost stories. Those were actually, from a Force perspective, very important. So if you if you have not seen Star Wars Clone Wars, please start.
I'm trying to get through a chronological order watch right now on Netflix. And it's so frustrating because I'll be like into it and be like, oh crap, I'm not watching the right episode. I have to go back and like choose the right one to watch.
I wish they would offer the either the like an arc option, like we're doing with the Clone Wars watch. I'm following along on my own because I can never make the time. There's a Clone Wars watch that I'm part of a group that is rewatching it, and I can just never make the time because I'm really busy right now, but I love them all. They're wonderful people and they enjoy it very much. I just get to like occasionally drop in, but I wish they would have two options on Netflix. I wish they would have the arc option and then the chronological option in addition to the production option, because we know, you and I know, sometimes production order doesn't actually align to story order. Sometimes even in an entire season, they'll produce shows or episodes that will come out later on in the season, and they'll do them earlier on in the season, like earlier on in the production order. So sometimes you have to look for the production code to get the truth of when it was produced. But Clone Wars, and I just want to say this from a production and from a creation perspective, very much aligned to George's own mentality of storytelling, which is that things don't necessarily need to happen in the order of chronological. They don't need to happen chronologically. There is a certain power to watching things chronologically to understand and see the whole character arc. But he himself was an iterative, non-linear storyteller, and
which is so interesting on its own, that because it doesn't happen very often.
Star Wars now, because of like how it's been set up, is that very much how Clone Wars functions, i.e. we'll have the movie, which technically happens after a couple of episodes that happen season 2. You know, like how Clone Wars is kind of out of order, and they choose to do certain stories and they choose to go back to tell again from that story or from before that story perspective in a future episode, is very much in line with how the storytelling is happening now. So even though episode 8 has happened, we have a tiny bit of post episode 8 storytelling that has happened in the comic books. We have stuff that is coming up from between episode 1 and episode 2 with Queen Shadow, and we have pre-episode 1 stuff, which is the first time I think in canon officially that we've had pre-episode 1 stuff coming out with Master and Apprentice. So we're jumping the canon around. We're jumping around time frame, and we're getting unreliable narrator storytelling too. So we're getting mythopoeia. We're getting myth in our mythopoeia.
I'm so excited for that book. It's going to be so great. All the Galaxy's Edge stuff, I'm pretty excited for. I know some people are kind of frustrated with it, and it's kind of like, I don't really want Galaxy's Edge stuff, but I think that it's going to connect to the sequel trilogy.
No, this is all in a lead up to episode 9 and the end. I'm very excited. Black Spire stuff. We're going there. It's going. They literally drew a map of where the Falcon goes in the Flight of the Falcon books, and it's like, and it goes to Bantu, and it's like, okay, so we're gonna go there in episode 9. Do you guys like not understand? Like that's the final resting place of the Falcon, like because they're building a park about it. Like literally, it's there. It's gonna live there forever now.
I'm so excited.
The Falcon will live. Are you excited to walk the halls of the Falcon?
Oh, I'm so excited. And like, I'm, apart from Star Wars fandom, I'm also huge into Disney parks. Like that's my other fandom. So it's like my two things combined. So I'm very excited.
I know you're like, I can do both. Yay. I'm very happy that we're getting more Star Wars Clone Wars. We're going to get it this year. I believe it's coming straight to the Disney streaming service.
I think fall 2019. Yeah.
So we're going to get Resistance Season 2, Mandalorian, and that fall 2019. So, yeah.
I'm hoping, like, do you know about the Disney streaming service in Canada? Like, what's the deal with that?
I've been trying to find out. The word on the street is we're getting it.
Okay. That's good.
It's classified as North America.
Okay.
So
that's good.
Hopefully, but sometimes they classify just the US as North America. I don't know. I hope us Canadians here are just sitting here like looking over the border like, please, can we have some awesome? Please.
Oh man.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. if we don't get it at the same time, it's going to be difficult.
I know. I'm gonna be sad. Okay, did you want to talk about Detours?
Yeah, okay. So Detours was this 3D animated show that was shelved by Disney. It already had 39 episodes done when the Disney acquisition happened. So there's finished episodes of this and they're not available. There's only one trailer and it's
What?
ridiculous. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Oh man.
I'm gonna link to it in the liner notes for this. I'm gonna watch it after.
It's okay. It's described as an animated sitcom.
Who is the showrunner for this?
It was Seth Green.
Well, he voiced a voice in Clone Wars.
Yeah,
he was Tito.
Yeah, and it's the dialogue is kind of cringy at times. It hasn't aged well.
It was of its time.
What else about it? Yeah, for me, it's a shame that they finished 39 episodes and those animators probably and the people in production probably put in so much work into it and no one's ever going to be able to see it. But the writing on it does not fit in with the current canon that Disney is trying to make. So I don't see it releasing. And the animation is pretty good and it's very pushed and caricatured, kind of almost like to the standard of the holiday special.
Oh.
It's yeah, it's really interesting looking. I really highly recommend everyone watch the trailer because it's something.
Okay, I will definitely watch it after this, and I'll link to it in the liner notes. And then we move into the Disney era, which it took them a little while to figure out what they were going to do. It was like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? Had they already been working on Strange Magic at the time?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, but I would believe so since it came out and they acquired Disney in 2012. So I would think that it would be in pre-production, but not sure.
Yeah. And so Strange Magic was an idea that George came up with while he was writing. Well, actually, it was mid-90s he wrote the script for it.
Yeah.
And he just never got around to actually producing it. It's a story of kind of two fairy kingdoms, the light kingdom and the dark kingdom. And I'm just going to summarize it just very briefly. It's 3D animation and the Dark King sits on his like little throne and he's all grumpy all the time. And then there's this princess that ends up kind of going in that direction and then being captured. And instead of, say, them fighting, they actually end up overcoming ideological differences and becoming romantic.
It's so great. It's so great.
It is incredibly Reylo. And I don't mean to like throw my weird Reylo agenda because I don't really have one. I just see all the storytelling and I'm like, yeah, it's happening. And certainly like, Rian Johnson has said Reylo is official as of, as of, episode 8. So
all in the movie.
It's all in the movie, he says, and so we know that was on George's mind at some point. And this was very much because in some ways he was growing up or he had kids in mid-90s and he wrote the prequels for them and they loved Queen Amidala, and the love story ends up in a tragedy. Like these little girls in his household, he could not write a story for them because he had to have it end in a particular way. It had to end in a particular way, this trilogy of movies, so the prequels. It had to end as a tragedy. I've gone into that before, but why it has to be a tragedy and how tragedy helps us sympathize with characters who are on redemption arcs, especially. But so he wrote this cute story about these two overcoming ideological differences, and it's very much love finds a way. And like, yeah. Did you want to say anything about Strange Magic?
So Strange Magic, I only recently watched it, maybe like a couple months ago, and loved it. And so I looked into like production for it, and George has said that realistic, like you were taking a photograph of someone's backyard, but
Yeah.
he also pushed the designs a little bit, which is like really, really great. And I love the lighting in the movie, like the forest, like the concept art for it is beautiful, and the singing is like awesome, and animation singing is like so great because you get to be really theatrical with it and really push the animation. It's like very exaggerated.
There's parts
and
where
so
like she
fun.
flings her arms out and is singing, and like that. And the story is it ends up being kind of rougher from a viewer perspective. I'm going to be kind of critiquing it. It's not the best animated show.
No.
But what they were trying to achieve is very lovely. And the animation itself is quite decent, I would say.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's enjoyable, I would say, to watch through the lens of where was George's brain at one point.
For sure. Because when I watched it, it was more about where was Lucasfilm's like head in this.
Yeah.
And how is this translating to what they're doing now? And those connections were what made like the film for me.
Yeah. And like there's little things that like, okay. Railers especially are very good at picking up on subtle details. There's a point where there's a flower that is like in the possession of the lead female's character, and it's exactly Rey's flower from her AT-AT on Jakku. And there's like I think you mentioned in the notes like the sand, or there's some other little things like some of the lines that the Dark Prince says, like
and the lightsaber fight, but it was like a sword fight.
Yeah,
but it was like the same.
Yeah, and so like it's certainly like the parallels are there. And there's always been this what if question in some people's minds of, well, what if they told Strange Magic, because this was the story that George always wanted to tell from a sequel trilogy perspective, and maybe that was actually the deal that George made when he sold the company, was this is the story I want you to tell for my girls.
I mean, maybe we'll find out when everything's released.
Yeah, and I mean, behind the scenes, understanding that, I don't know, George is not involved anymore, but what if part of the deal was you tell this story and then you can do whatever you want? We don't know what the deal was. Sure. We don't know. But if that's the truth, which we know they always have had a plan, like, no one can tell me they haven't. Yeah. I already know. It's in interviews. They've had a plan from the beginning. But if that's...
Adam and Daisy know.
Yeah, Adam and Daisy have known from the beginning how things are happening. Yeah. Like, you don't do a trilogy without having a plan, without it probably being written, like, at least in rough detail, high-level plot points before you start. Off my high horse. I think that this is the Reylo trilogy.
I think so too.
Plot point wise.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So then kind of after Disney took over, very soon after, the decision was to make Star Wars Rebels. And this was led by Dave Filoni taking this on. I think they were conceptualizing it maybe before Clone Wars ended,
maybe,
because they were getting really close to the end. The Utapau arc, Utapau happens like only a couple of months before the end of the wars. So I think they were maybe conceptualizing something that would happen next. So they had a good idea. But what I love about Star Wars Rebels is that they switched almost the lens by which they viewed Star Wars. And they tried to do very Ralph McQuarrie inspired style, and went into found family centric storytelling.
The great thing about Rebels is how it's so influenced by traditional, and it's a 3D show, but it has all these traditional subtleties, like being inspired by Ralph McQuarrie, and the concept art team actually developed digital paintbrushes that matched the brushes that Ralph would have used.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so like in Photoshop, you can create your own brushes, and they did that to match his actual physical paintbrushes.
That's so awesome. I wanted to say, like, from a story perspective, they very much wanted to blend the story as a lead up, like in parallel to things like Rogue One that were happening, but also to give a different frame and a different perspective that the rebellion is larger than what we've seen in the original trilogy, to give us some feeling to how it's like to live under the Empire, to give us a personal story of a different set of Force users from a different angle, because there's an entire galaxy full of stories out there, and this is just one of them. Also, we got some amazing Force conversations happening about what the Force is.
Yeah.
Wow, I got to say my own name of my show in a conversation. I don't know if that's the first time or not, but there are a few clips from Dave Filoni talking about saying things, and I need to pull some of them because he's like, what the Force is going on? Like, it's like, I need to pull all the times that he says what the Force, because it's pretty awesome, because he thinks about what the Force is and how it reflects, and it's all from George. I have been told that there is a notebook.
A notebook just about the Force?
Yes, from George Lucas.
And it passed down to Dave?
No, I think it's sitting in the story group now, but it's all of George Lucas's thoughts on what the Force means, how it affects the galaxy, and Dave has talked about it in interviews that it exists. So
I love that they keep the, like, I guess the context of the Force like alive through everything, and like it'll just stay the same for forever, basically, as long as they're sticking to this like rule book almost.
Yeah, like I think it's just like it's like in some ways like the Force Bible.
Yeah.
Because it came from George, right? And I want to see it. Like, that's my dream. I feel like that is like what the Force is in this world, is what was from George's brain and what Dave was taught by George, like especially when they did the Mortis arc, when they did Yoda's Lost Tales or whatever, and then what they've done in Star Wars Rebels is a reflection of that, and the World Between Worlds, which has built slowly over the course of Rebels to its pinnacle at the end season. Rebels is amazing. Some people called it very kid-like in the beginning. And again, that I think that's actually because of the establishment episodes. Mm-hmm. So back to our earlier points, when you need to establish characters and relationships, it takes you longer because you need to have almost these episodic treatments of the characters so you can show what their personalities are like and how they interact with each other. Yeah. So then you can add in conflict externally, internally, to allow them to change. And without that establishment, you don't have a good base to see how far the character will go. And by the end of the fourth season, Ezra is absolutely completely different because he has changed on his journey.
Yeah, and it's not only the characters, but it's the creators too. They need to find their grounds in the first episodes too, and understand how the world works, how the language of the show works, how people move, how people talk, like all that stuff. It's like it's found in those earlier episodes. So Dave said this interesting quote about the design of Rebels, and he said, "We wanted something that was going to be reminiscent of the original trilogy. So I suggested we base it off Ralph's designs. I wanted to do that on Clone Wars, but honestly, we didn't have the know-how to accomplish it at the time. We were able to do it with Rebels though with round-shaped characters and things that were a bit more classic animation."
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he points out that it's like classic animation, because that's where Dave came from. He came from classical hand-drawn animation. And I noticed it so much upon rewatching a couple episodes that it really stands out, the subtlety of hand-drawn animation, and to a point that they even studied the film Tangled, because Tangled as a movie is one of the first 3D animated movies to really be able to bring in like traditionally looking expressions and animation. So they studied like Glenn Keane, who is like one of the most renowned animators of our time right now, who was working on Tangled and drawing over on top of the 3D animators' work to make it more lifelike, make it more 2D feeling, even though it's still 3D.
And this is actually a change in animation that happened around this period of time too, with the invention of 3D cell shading characters. So they started to, at the time we had Iron Man Armored Adventure come out, and there was a few other shows at the same time that took this, and what they did was
Tron Uprising.
They played with the using 3D models, and then what they would do is do cell shading, animation layering, which flattened the image to make it look 2D at the time. So a lot of people are trying to get back to that feel of 2D with the benefits of 3D.
Yeah.
Because even though it can take longer for 3D animation, you have things that benefit the animators doing them in 3D. Like you can run them through algorithms by which they pre-animate. They'll walk. Like you don't need to animate each step because you can tell the character to walk. You can tell the character to do things.
Sometimes I think that people think that the computer does more than it
I'm just saying that there's some things that they can take shortcuts on.
Yeah. So I think there's some people who think that there's just an animate button that you just push on the computer, but it's not.
But with advances in technology, they're able to get benefit out of having it be in this 3D virtual world. With a computer helping. It's just like having a word processor, and in some ways it's more like having a word processor with occasional fill in the blank, like telling you what the next word is going to be. That word might not be what you were intending to write, so you can't use it, but maybe it is. And so you might be able to skip 1 out of 10 words rather than having to animate all or write all 10 words.
Like that makes a lot of sense, and that's like, that sounds right.
Yeah, it's not everything, but it takes some of the, for lack of a better term, administrative burden off of the animators by having it just fill in that extra 10%. I don't know what the actual percentage is, but it is a bit like it helps. Another analogy would be, it's like how when people who do physical labor now can wear those like they're like augmented physical things that help them hold their body correctly and have like basically robotics in them, and they can work for 8 hours without having back strain, right? It's like that. It's just like it's an extra support layer that helps the animators be more successful, and so they're probably able to do like more creative things easier, and it doesn't take them as much effort to do the beautiful art that we're getting because of the advances in technology.
I've always been told in school because I was studying traditional, and our teachers said that if you know how to animate in traditional, you can learn the software because the software is just a tool.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a tool. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always see it like that the software is just something that'll help you out a bit, but you still need to understand like how animation works, how all those 12 principles work and everything.
Yeah, let's just take a side diversion to in Rebels talk about World Between Worlds, because they actually brought in a separate company to do this one animated scene of the Mortis gods on the wall.
And the wolves.
And the wolves that animate from that, who run along the wall. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, GhostBot did that, and they're in San Francisco, and they also do Forces of Destiny.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I linked you, I guess you can add it in the show notes, but there's a link to the actual 4-legged walk cycle of the wolves, and it's traditionally animated. I think it's digital, but it's still hand-drawn. And it's so cool. And then also the fact that they did quadruped walks, like, at all. I love how many animals are on the show, and like quadruped walks are hard, but they're really fascinating, and learning how, like, it's so important for animators to understand like the biology and the mechanics of how people move and how animals move,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that when animals move, they actually walk on the tips of their toes.
Yeah.
Unless it's a bear, and then bears walk like humans.
And like gorillas who walk on their knuckles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yes, like horses are basically on their tippy toes their whole time. And yeah, exactly to your point.
Yeah, so it's like they had to do all this research, and it's something that maybe like the average person doesn't realize that animators have to have that knowledge too. It's not only artistic, there's also like this kind of science to it and this math to it too. And it's like a very like rounded like industry of like understanding all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm such a nerd for that kind of stuff, like knowing like how the animals move and like studying it for stuff like that.
That's awesome. And midway through Rebels, we also got the start of the Freemaker Adventures, which were run kind of as a separate wing, not under the official like Lucas Animation world, because they were more related to the Lego Animation team, but they were in like almost like this joint venture between
adjacent and canon
adjacent. Yeah. And like when I spoke with Leland Chi, he was like, it's like canon through a Lego window. Like, because they had to add in master building as a function of the Force, which is so cool.
Oh, it's so cool. And I've only watched about 4 episodes of it to prepare, and it's really charming and it's witty. Like the way that they're able to use Lego, like they use it like in the Lego movie or in the Star Wars Lego games. Like I love those games. I'm not a gamer, but I like adore the Lego Star Wars games.
It follows the same like logic as like Marvel Lego Adventures or DC Lego. Like it's Lego itself has this master build like function in the animation or in the video games. They have this concept and then they built on it with the Lego movie, and they all have this idea that you can master build. So they had to...
It's like a language through all of the Lego shorts and shows and movies.
Yeah, so they
keep to that Bible.
Yeah, they had to build that out in world. So even though it is like canon adjacent, it is... I very much view it as a good way to view canon. Like I do. I think that the Freemaker Adventures tell truth of storytelling through its own lens. So please do check them out, because even it tells the same themes of Star Wars. And that's what I love is like family, doing the right thing, hope, all of those things. But it's for kids. And that's fundamentally what Star Wars is about. So you get the themes of Star Wars broken down to its micro levels. And like back to Rebels just briefly, that's why some people seem to get Rebels really well, because it's the basic themes of Star Wars told for kids. So it's a lot simpler to digest and understand. And it isn't layered with the complexity of adult storytelling that we'll get in some of the movies where people have gray morals or things are obfuscated by emotion. Yeah. People are very on the surface in the animated shows because it is for kids to digest and to understand. And so when I hear talking heads on the internet talk about how, Rebels has the best storytelling and Dave Filoni is the best storyteller, I'm like, he just gets to be the most obvious storyteller. And even though he's obvious, he still gets to be super subtle about it when it comes to things like the Force and what things mean and how it's tied into the larger universe. I would just say, if you don't understand the themes of Star Wars yet, just watch the animations. And then you'll start to pick them up in the larger shows. And
there's something for everyone because it's digestible for any age group pretty much. And there's little things thrown in there for different types of people who people that want to see the creature stuff, the people that want to see the Force stuff. And then there's little subtleties that might go over the kid's head that as adults, you might latch onto that and be like, oh, like that's so awesome that they threw that into the show.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about Forces of Destiny briefly? They canceled it until after episode 9 because it's too much of a spoiler. Maybe. I feel like they're just being really, really careful with the storytelling. Like, as you know, they put a kibosh on a plot point or a moment in Ralph Breaks the Internet with Kylo acting like a spoiled kid.
Yeah, I love that. They were like, nope.
No,
Can't do that.
They have an idea of what they need to do, and it's strategic of how they're telling the story. They're going to make him seem like a monster in Resistance, but I very much believe we're going to get a humanizing moment in Resistance before episode 9. I suspect it will either be at the end of this season. I think we're going to get Adam Driver in the voice before the end of Resistance season 1, or before episode 9 comes out, season 2, the first part of the season. So it'll be interesting. I really do think that they're going to add in a humanizing moment for him to prepare us for sure. Well, it's not to prepare us, because we are adults.
Yeah, we are prepared.
We are prepared, and we already see these things. It's to actually prepare the kids who already see him as somebody who's identifiable, which is so fascinating that kids get him. It's so fascinating that kids understand that he is not actually a bad guy. He's a bad guy, but, troubled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hope we see him unmasked on Resistance.
That would be amazing to see the animation.
The thing is his design, like Adam Driver has such a distinct face that like they could push that design like so nicely and it would be so appealing.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did a really great job of Oscar Isaacs. We're talking about Resistance ahead of time because we're so excited. But Forces of Destiny was really cute, stylized, 2D, traditional looking.
Yeah, it's tradigital.
So
it's meant to look traditional, but it's digitally animated. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that they wanted to have cohesion between the dolls and the shows and to really bring in kids that way, like that they could create their own stories with the dolls that would go along with these shorts. And I think for me, it really it connects to me because I, as an animator now, I always liked to play with my dolls when I was a kid and act out scenes for them, but I never liked to play dress up like myself. I never played pretend, but I liked my dolls playing pretend. So I think it makes a lot of sense for me now that I like basically animating like other things and making them act, but I'm acting through them kind of.
Oh, yeah. And so they really tried to tie that in, and they also released a few after like these shorts. And again, they're this non-linear storytelling because they jump around. Like they'll do like a Kira episode, and then they'll do, like Hera post Return of the Jedi on, with Chopper and, some Ewok storytelling. And then they'll do Leia and Luke on Endor. Like they jumped around a lot.
Yeah, I think they showed moments to kids that they would grasp to and really maybe create their own story off of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Like Leia with the dress and everything. I could see myself as a kid gravitating to that episode and being I can tell more stories with my doll with this.
Yeah, I really liked that idea. I just don't know that the platform by which it was released online was the right platform. I liked them a lot. I don't know. I know a lot of women that did. My daughter never watched them. So.
Oh no, she never interested.
No, it never interested. I think it just hit her at the wrong age. She's into older storytelling now, and I think it was for a particular narrow window of age that it's appealing. It appeals to me because it's Star Wars, and pretty much anything that's Star Wars, I will be like, yes, please.
Yeah.
But she very much likes Resistance, and she very much liked Rebels, although she has refused to watch the end few episodes of Rebels to this day.
Oh, no.
Because she found out that a certain character dies, and she does not want to see that. She's refused to watch it.
I don't appreciate the fact that I saw it. I whenever I think about that moment, I get it's hard.
Yeah, so this animation is very serious for these stories affect kids too. And I think that it was still an important story to talk about. My son and I had a really good conversation after watching that end arc about death and about letting go, and just kind of conversations about people who have passed. I think that they're doing good work from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, and I've read a quote from Carrie Beck where she was talking about how animation makes it possible to have those conversations with kids. She was saying about how much Bambi affected her when she was a kid. and how those really like, they're very heavy things, but they can be more digestible for kids through animation.
Yeah. And like kids get it and they can get it. It just has to come in a package that is digestible for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like Star Wars has been doing a great job with that.
Yeah. Resistance. Yay.
Yay. We can talk about Resistance now.
So Resistance is set just before the sequel trilogy. It's about a member of the Resistance, a brand new recruit who was recruited by Oscar Isaac's character from the sequel trilogy, who is actually portrayed by Oscar Isaac, Poe Dameron, and it's about Kaz.
Kazuda Xiono.
All right. It's about Kaz, who is a spy. So it's got that like espionage feel. It's got that World War I, World War II pilot feel. You know, kind of that time before a conflict is about to happen. And historically speaking, if you go and read, you know, the letters or the journals from people who were either like stationed at bases or people who talk about impending conflict, like that something's coming, basically. The feeling that the show gives is historically accurate to those feelings. So before World War I happened, many people wrote about how they wanted to be heroes and experience glory. They wanted to go to war. People would write about how they wanted to go to war. They wanted to experience glory and adventure, and like they were almost primed and ready to fight. And the horrors of war is what we're going to get a little bit more, I think, in Resistance once things are kind of in
grow
there.
Up for sure.
Yeah, but like how Kaz is like, I want to be a hero is very historically accurate to the human condition of wanting to have adventure happen to them and not realizing what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, he doesn't realize the consequences of, I guess, like what could go down.
Yes.
How serious things are.
Yes, exactly. And it's important to tell that story to kids, again, because kids sometimes will get into bad situations in their teenage years and not realize that, hey, you know, just wanting to have adventure, you end up with the wrong crowd, you end up with a gang, or you end up with the wrong group of people. And that has serious consequences just because you wanted to feel adventure. So if they can live it through a character's animation eyes and live that story a little bit, they might have a solution to how, rather than going down that bad path.
Yeah, it's really like some interesting stuff that they're able to do with the storytelling and bringing in real life into this show, even though it's Star Wars, it's fiction, it's bacon in space, you know, but it's real.
Yeah.
There's real life lessons in a lot of it.
Talked a little bit leading up to this about the cell shading animation, but did you want to talk about your perspective of it?
Yeah, I love the cell shaded animation, and it reminds me a lot of Tron Uprising, like the Disney XD show that got canceled.
Iron Man Armored Adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say about it, but it's just about like kind of flattening the lighting that they do on the rigs, and
I think that they're still figuring it out, because some of the animation has been, as the season has gone on, has gotten better to make it still, because I think some people react very badly to this style. Like some people hate it.
No, well, but at this point they probably wouldn't be fixing anything because they wouldn't be getting reactions yet to what we're seeing, because this stuff was already probably
No, but I think
before.
that they're just learning, like, because they have added more shade, which creates more of that 3D effect with the flattening. Like they need more light variations to be able to create, because in some of the earlier episodes the faces are very flat.
Yeah, with no definition, like for cheekbones cheekbones and like all like chin and everything.
They're adding more light sources, I think, to be able to create more variation, so you can actually see like the nose and the chin and the difference between the chin and the neck. Because if you don't have those variations of light sources, it creates flat. Like everything.
Yeah, and that's how the lighting department would be like working on that and like taking care of that stuff.
I would say that they're just learning over time, is like, you know, they did kind of some earlier stuff, and then like they're like, oh, this works, or this looks better, or, you know, it's just iterating, right, as they go.
I think a lot of people find how bright it is childish.
Yeah.
I think that's like what I'm hearing from people who are like meh about the style, that it looks childish, but I don't think it looks childish. I think it's a different style. It's something different. It's new.
Oh, I have thoughts on that.
It's shinier, maybe. I don't know.
I have thoughts on that. So, okay. Crack knuckles. Marie Claire, what does this do? Okay. You cannot show how dark it's going to get unless you have the setup of how bright it was before the darkness. It's going to get dark.
And you see it in the promo for the end of the season.
And I've talked about this. I knew we were going to get the destruction of Hosnian Prime through Kaz's eyes, because that's his dad, that's his family, that is his home. Hosnian Prime is his home, and that will forever change TFA in our minds.
It's going to be devastating.
It's going to be, I'm going to cry.
A lot.
And that is the power of iterative storytelling.
It's all Amy Beth Christensen's art direction. It's genius. I said this already, but that promo was beautiful, gorgeous, like lighting, the colors, the mood of just like those scenes. You felt the destruction almost. Like it was just.
I'm going to make a call, and I'm going to say that we're going to get a different musical treatment of the intro theme, you know, the da 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 da, which feels very Back to the Future for me for some reason. But we're gonna get a different musical treatment of that music when it's a dark episode. They did it in Rebels. We're gonna get like
I think so.
Or something like that. There's gonna be a different musical treatment. They might even change the color of the intro. They did it in Rebels, not just for Maul, but also they started to do it in Clone Wars. They did it in Rebels when there was darker episodes, so people would know that there was something dark happening. I actually had a weird conversation before I started podcasting on Twitter with Pablo Hidalgo about the intros, and he's like, I think it's just a stylistic choice. I'm like, seriously? It gives me a warning as a parent that I'm gonna have to have a conversation with my kids after. Like, it just sets I think it's great. Like, heads up, it's going to be dark. Like, it's also influenced by anime style, and actually has, some animation that's done by that team, like a team that specializes in that for Star Wars Resistance. So
yeah, in Resistance, actually, it's animated partially in Japan.
Oh, wow.
And it's some of the same animators who did Clone Wars.
That's awesome. So very similar, at least from an experience perspective with Star Wars. But yeah, no, I like how it's different. I like that it's a fresh take on storytelling in a new, it feels like new media, even though, and a new medium, even though it is 3D animation. I love it. I'm very excited to see where they're going.
Yeah, and it's not even just like the colors and the lettings that are different. It's the actual like the movement, the animation itself. Like, it's very, very Robert, like we were saying, Robert Hosey, and kind of just like, it's very like 30s and extreme, and Kaz's arms break. Like, you can pause a frame and
like mid-arm because it's so bent.
And it's like it moves so quickly that you wouldn't notice. But once you go frame by frame, you see those things. And there's some great animation. I forget what episode it was, but it was Hype Phazon. He was like jumping on a table in the lounge, in the Ace Lounge. And on the jump, the timing on it and the fluidity was beautiful. Like it was something that I've never seen in Star Wars animation before. Like it was just, I love what they're doing.
I'm very excited, and the ship design is beautiful. The Colossus itself, the water, like there's so many things this has going for it, and just because they start out being very light and fresh only is a foil to being able to show darker things later on. And I very much believe, because of how many people I've spoken with, that Star Wars and Lucasfilm does not shy away from dark topics with children. So don't ever think that. Mm-hmm. Just get on board, get caught up. You will not regret it. By the end of this season, you will probably think that Star Wars Resistance is the best animated show that has come along. Show.
I think it will become that. And I think even, like I said, the rubber hosing animation is going to get more subtler too. We won't see it as much when it gets
dark. But it's to show character growth and character change. Like this is all in service of the story. Like what we've said this whole way along is like when Disney, when Clone Wars happened, there was a break in the mentality. And now everything is in service of story rather than in service of visuals. Yeah.
I can't wait to see where it goes. It's incredible.
I just want to briefly touch on Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures, which is non-linear again, but it's taking moments, and it's built for Star Wars Kids, the new YouTube channel, and it's taking moments from all of the movies, but with an iterative, collective storytelling lens, taking in the storytelling of the whole saga and even things that have existed outside of maybe necessarily the movies. But like an example of this, I tweeted about it, but there's this moment in one of the episodes where R2-D2 and C-3PO are escaping, and this happens in episode 4. They're escaping the Tantive 4, and they have a moment where they're trying to get to the escape pod, and they stop and they see Vader walking down the hall, and then he ignites his red lightsaber. If this had happened, 40 years ago, this short, that moment means nothing to us. But because of the prequels, because of what we've seen Anakin go through, because we know that Anakin created C-3PO, has this relationship with R2-D2 through the Clone Wars, it means so much more to us because R2-D2 knows something. Maybe C-3PO remembers something in the fragments of his memory. We don't know, but it means something to us as the viewing audience. And that is, again, the power of animation. It is the power of iterative storytelling. And I'm very thankful for these Galaxy of Adventures, which is like giving us a different lens by which to view Star Wars.
And a different style too. It kind of reminds me of like little golden books almost. Like it's an interesting look for sure.
Let's briefly talk about what we think is happening next. We know officially what has been announced is Resistance Season 2, more Galaxy of Adventures leading up all this way to Episode 9, and Clone Wars Season 7. What do you want to happen? So maybe choose a couple of things you want to talk about of what you want to have happen and what you think will have happen or what will happen next.
I put a bunch of Forces of Destiny things on my list, and now I'm sad.
We might get them after.
Question mark. But I wanted an Emphas Nest. Yeah, I really want an Emphas Nest one. That would
like
be
a
awesome.
rebellion. Oh, but she might come back live action in Cassian, but an Emphas Nest like show would be so cool.
Yeah, and like style wise, I'd like them to do a 2D show, not just shorts. You know how like Forces of Destiny is 2D, but I'd like to see like a full show 2D. And I think I'd like to see like characters like Dr. Aphra from the comics show up in animation. I really like her. She's like a really, really interesting character, and I think she would be like cool to bring into an animated series, especially with the like archaeological stuff, and like it would be more accessible for kids to start consuming like her as a character, because like I guess sometimes the kids like don't read the comics as much, and it's like more grown up stuff.
I think we're going to get an announcement at Celebration that the search for Ezra whatever it's titled will be a show.
Yeah.
It'll be, and I have a few
I can't wait for
thoughts
that.
on that. They left it off purposefully. This is the next phase of the storytelling, guys. And then people were like, what? Resistance? What? But I mean, they just have to work on it, right? I think, with Ashley coming, we're definitely going to get that announcement. Not that she wouldn't come because of fashion and her universe and stuff like that, but I think we're definitely getting that announcement.
Yeah.
And
I wanted
did
so
you know
bad.
that the only character, what are they called? The character, when they show the characters costuming, like all the way around, those like the turnarounds?
A turnaround.
So Tracy Canobio, who's like the animation publicist, releases these for cosplayers. And the only one that's restricted is Ahsoka's end costume.
Yeah, I saw her tweet. That's interesting. They're definitely using that.
Yeah, there's something about that they cannot release because they're working on something. That to me is the biggest clue that there's more story yet to tell. I think that they're going to announce it at Celebration, maybe during a Rebels like closeout, because Rebels ended after the last celebration. So we didn't get although there was a Comic-Con panel, we didn't get anything to kind of feel the end of it. I think we might get a Rebels panel or an animation panel in general, kind of like how they do the book panels. I don't know what they're going to do going forward, but the head of animation, Dave, you have my trust, because not only did you take a step back and allow other people to do different storytelling, what we've gotten with Star Wars Resistance, but anything we've get going forward, I think is amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they do and what they announce at Celebration. It'll be awesome.
The tales of Luke being a Jedi teacher in animation, because we could get like Mark Hamill to do the voice.
Oh, in animation? That would be really interesting. I would love to see that. And that could be a 2D show too. And I would be so happy with that.
Like his adventures in the 30 years. That would be so cool.
There's so much there.
Well, this was our maybe not so brief history of Star Wars animation. But I really loved having you, Alex, on the show to talk all about this, to really give good context so people kind of understand like how long things take, that it is a lot of effort, and that, there's a lot of history there for them to pull on and to understand. And I love what they're doing. I love that it's almost experimental every time. And
they keep changing their designs every time, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I think that it's giving us fresh looks and fresh feels, and it's just new lenses by which to view the story of Star Wars, which is awesome. So, do you have any final thoughts, Alex, on this?
I just want to say, a lot of the analysis that I do is my opinion, and any art, it's subjective. So if you love the style of something that I'm not so gung-ho about, there's nothing wrong with that. It's art, right? So yeah. So I guess that's all I had to say.
It's art about something that's fake and in space. It is inherently subjective. But what is wonderful about it is that it is, looking at it, it is just another view, a window, a lens to view humanistic storytelling. So Alex, thank you again for coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime you want to talk about anything.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you out there on the web if they're looking to track you down? Yeah,
Twitter's probably the best place, and it's at Alex Leonis on Twitter. And I'm open to talking about animation anytime, Star Wars anytime, Disney parks. Those are my things.
And yes, so thank you for coming on the show. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We like to thank all of our patrons, especially those who love What the Force, Night Huntress, and In Wild Space. We are available on iTunes, Google Play, and other podcatchers, including YouTube. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.